I'd like to explain today what I call the sock theory. What the sock theory is basically this theory that the soft tissue that covers our entire skeleton and skull acts a little bit like a sock. If you push your skeleton and your head fully through the sock so that it forms the shape that the sock was designed to have, then everything works really well. But if you're kind of like halfway through the sock, then you lose flexibility, strength, and whatnot because basically, like, the foot is not fully into the sock and therefore it's not filling up the shape that the sock was meant to have. So, let me explain this a bit more. And you can imagine, like, think about a long, tight sock, right? If you've ever had like a long, tight sock and maybe your foot's a little bit sweaty and you need to push your foot. Like it doesn't just go slip right on. Like you gotta push it on. That is almost how I view this process that we're doing with this mouth guard and the biomechanics that I talk about, is that like we're kind of pushing the skeleton through the soft tissue sock. And as it pushes through that sock, it gets more flexible and stronger. And then eventually when the skeleton is exactly where the sock wants it to be, you're pretty much like good looking and strong and flexible by default. And that sounds pretty crazy, right? Let me talk a little bit about how I concluded this. So, one of the things I do, so I can kind of feel, right? I feel like where should I put some stretch? And so, like right now, I know if I can press on my head, it's putting a bit of a stretch. And then later, I might be pressing here, right? And you kind of feel that you're like pushing something through this soft tissue. And I can feel where I need to push or where I need to stretch in order to keep things moving. If you think about that, it's kind of like like the sock metaphor would be you're halfway through the sock and you're trying to like push the foot further through the sock, but it's stuck. And then you got to kind of like grab a piece of the sock to give it some slack. And then the foot will inch forward a little bit. Like that's kind of the same way that I view this, right? You can think of like, okay, like if it's a foot and a sock, like you're playing with little pieces of the sock so that the foot goes a little bit further through. Like here, I'm like pushing my head from different angles to push the head through the soft tissue sock. And I've done this many times before and kind of I'm just repeating things that I've done for a number of years. So I know that it does work like this. And I have taken this to what I consider the end before, where like back in around 2016, I viewed that I fully pushed through my skull and skeleton through the soft tissue sock. And like I looked better and functioned better than I ever had my entire life. And I was, 38, 39 years old and I was eating whatever I want and doing, pretty much zero exercise at the time. And that's when I first came up with these hypotheses that, wow, like, the human body doesn't work anything like what our society currently believes. It is all about these biomechanics and pushing our skeleton through this soft tissue sock. The other thing I want to say is that, like, I think that this works regardless of age, regardless of genetics, right? So it doesn't, like, I don't think that this works any worse on a person that is 67 years old than it does on a person that's 20 years old. Like it might be a little bit easier for the 20-year-old. They don't, maybe their sock is not kind of like pulled off as much as the older person. Cause as you get older, you grind down your teeth and generally like, things collapse more over time. So you're more likely to be more collapsed if you're older. But I see a lot of young people that are quite collapsed these days, especially, ones that did orthodontics and stuff. I just want to be really clear that I think that this holds true regardless of age, regardless of genetics. If you think, okay, maybe I'm right for a second, what does that mean? That means that the entire puzzle is how do you push the skeleton, the skull through the sock so that it gets to the end and then you can live a very nice, happy, healthy life and be very good looking and put almost zero effort into that. And that is what I want to achieve and what I plan to achieve. If you think what that means, like it changes like humanity on a level that I think like nothing can even compares, right? So I'm basically saying that like literally everything that they do in a hospital is almost wrong, right? Like pharmaceuticals, no need. All you got to do is push the skeleton through the sock. All the body parts are going to be in the right place and you solve disease or most disease at the root cause. Surgeries, completely useless, right? Like these hip knee replacement surgeries, like they're only because the skeleton is not fully through the sock. Push the skeleton fully through the sock. You don't need the surgery. You can think about this about almost everything that we do, like health, diet wise. And you just circle back to the fact that if you fix the biomechanics, you don't need that other stuff. And I've seen lots of clues about how this happens on my own body, right? Like I was explaining how I push and I feel things pushing through. And after I do my stretches, I see these lines as if things are moving underneath the skin. and things are assuming the right position, and I get more dimension back to my face, and I get more flexibility to my body. And I just see like there's lots and lots of signs that point to the fact that this is how it works. And that's why I'm so confident. And it's based purely on logic, on what I'm observing and what I'm doing. So I just want to wrap up by saying that what I'm saying is quite blasphemous. And a lot of people are going to look at me and say, like, this person's not even a doctor. They're not a dentist. Why should we believe him? And like, yeah. And like, I'll admittedly say, like, I hate looking at blood. I don't ever want to be a doctor. I don't ever want to be a dentist. And what I consider myself good at is logic. And so I'm arriving at these conclusions based on logic. For all the people that think that the current paradigm is correct, like just step back and look at what's happened the last 50 to 100 years, right? Like when I look at it, it's like pharmaceuticals are exploding, all these surgeries are exploding. Are human beings getting healthier, right? Just walk around your average middle American town, which I did a few years back when I was visiting my father, went to a Walmart, and like 90% of people were just massive. They were so unhealthy, 19-year-old kids that like can't even walk. That is what our current health paradigm has led us to, right? And all these countries that think, oh, that's just Americans, they're eating their McDonald's all the time. I can tell you, like, this thing is generational. It gets worse. Like, America's probably furthest down this pipe, but everybody else is eventually going to get there. And I see it happening, right? Like, I've seen it in countries like Russia, where like in the last 15, 20 years, like the way people look has gotten worse by a lot. So I'm basically saying that that entire health paradigm is wrong, and that maybe this whole thing works like a sock. And I draw that conclusion based purely on logic.